Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 5th season. Be sure to like and subscribe. Enjoy this amazing episode because Keone Young boards the mothership. You know him as the voice of Storm Shadow in the original G.I. Joe cartoon and hundreds of other credits. Now come aboard and go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Young. Thank you for coming to Vertical Stars Podcast.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
It's totally an honor to have you on my show. As we were talking off air, you've done a lot of the shows that I've enjoyed, especially growing up. I look forward to talking about all of these with you. So thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
So I always start with a question of inspiration. So inspire your love for acting and who your earliest influences.
Well, gee, I come from the old school, Uh, basically I was a theater kid. I loved the theater. I hated school, so I had to find some alternative. Well, I didn't have to, but I did. Um, so, besides being like a criminal or, just a roustabout radical kid, I fell in love. I felt most comfortable in the theater. And I had a wonderful drama teacher. Her name was Grace McAllister, and this was in Honolulu because I grew up in Honolulu. And she opened up to me. She urged me to look at the literature of theater, and so I read Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams, Edward Albee. I just fascinated, and even some of the classics by Ibsen and Moliere. And I went on to that, and I just fell in love with literature, the story aspect, which today I find kind of like missing in a lot of films and I grew up on the movies from that period as well. I grew up on Jimmy Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, Ernest Borgnine, who even Rod, what's his name, well, Brando, and what's his name? The guy who was in the Pawnbroker, Rod. I can't think of his name right now. But anyway, a lot of the old movie actors who I gather came from theater as well. You know, I went to school and I would imitate other actors, but the actors I would imitate were people like Richard Burton. You know,
Mhm.
and so I don't know if this is answering your question, but that's kind of like my influences. I come from that, which text and subtext were more important than visualization, so to speak.
Now, my day job, I'm a English teacher. As you know,
Yeah,
I teach eighth grade English. Right now, we're actually reading Shakespeare. We're doing A Midsummer Night's Dream. So there's some
yeah,
kids who I teach who are telling me that they want to be actors when they get older, right? Now,
yeah.
when you're thinking about theater, what specific plays did you act in? What were you did you find yourself more as an introvert or an extrovert? And how did that performing on theater help you kind of express yourself?
Well, in life, I was an extrovert, but I always felt intimidated by the theater.
Hmm.
Um, I grew up speaking a native patois, which we call Pidgin English, which
Okay.
was not your standard stage speech, you know,
Right.
which all actors have to maintain, you know. And it's so funny because you speak of Shakespeare, because when I used to listen to Americans doing Shakespeare, I was awed. And then I went to England and I saw them do Shakespeare, and I was like, oh, this is incredible. Those guys are not even close to what Shakespeare did. So, anyway, when I first started, like I said, I was intimidated because I was a street kid. I was like, like Sherlock Holmes, what is the irregulars they were called. There was these kids around the place where he lived and that he would rely on to get tidbits of information and stuff. But I was uh, you know, I was a street kid, so I was really intimidated. But uh, I love how the magic of theater could create reality, that would stretch your mind. So I wanted to become a builder of sets, a painter, hang lights, light design, costume design. I was all into that. And then as I worked in the theater doing that, because, when you do that, you're working there like 10, 12 hours a day behind the scenes, which I felt most comfortable. I would be there, I would be on the stage crew, and I would watch the acting, and I would watch the actors in some great plays like The Death of a Salesman. Oh, I love The Death of a Salesman. And I would watch and I would look at the actors and go, they're not that good. I think I can do better as good. And so, but that was just in my dream as a child, because I would think, well, nobody would want to see me as an actor.
Mm.
And, but however, and this is a great lesson for actors. Actors always think that the play, the story is about them. It's not. It's not, because I would watch the play, I would watch the actors, then I would watch the audience. It's about the audience and how they feel about the moment, not how you feel. They don't give a shit about how you feel. They give a damn about how they feel. And
Right.
that's what actors have to figure out. So consequently, in that situation, actors never wanted to do the small parts because they would always think, I should play the lead, or I should have at least a big part.
Yeah.
So nobody wanted to do the little part. So the directors would see me backstage and go, "Hey, kid, come here. You know what? I need a guy to do one line. Come here." And that's what I did every night. In Death of a Salesman, they go into a coffee shop and the guy and Willie Loman orders a cup of coffee, and I'd be the waiter going, "Can I take your order, sir?" That was my one line, and he said, "Give me a cup of coffee, kid," and and that was my one line, and I felt natural.
Yeah.
Whereas other actors would try and make a moment out of it. And so I kept, and this is a really funny story. I've told before, so some of your people might have heard this before. I was in the Honolulu Community Theater, and nobody wanted to be a chorus person except dancers who. And so they needed a voice, let's say a male voice to sing bass, and I had a low voice at that time when I was young. So they would say, "Hey kid, come here. We need a bass guy. Can you hit this note, a D?" And I would go, "Yes." They would go, "Good. Stand in here." And then I did all these plays like How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, which was really big when I was a kid, and My Fair Lady. And I had to do the whole thing. Every Duke and I'm getting married in the morning. And so I just started doing that because they needed someone to fill that spot. And so going on further, I would work with a young, I was, I believe, 15 years old at the time. I worked with a young lady who was 16, who had a beautiful voice, but she was not, like a gorgeous, she did all these little parts like I did, and she did all these roles in the chorus. And we grew together, and she was very kind to me, and she supported me. And that was Bette Midler.
Oh shit. That's
And she
amazing.
became Bette Midler. So
Right.
we graduated from high school, and we were taking acting classes at the time. I was a year younger. She said, "I'm going to New York." I said, "Well, I don't have enough money to go to New York. I'll go to LA to become an actor."
Right.
And so she went to New York and she became famous, and I went to LA to become a working actor.
Oh, that is awesome. That's freaking awesome.
So I came here and I enrolled in the only school that would accept me, which was the Pasadena Playhouse, which was a college of theater arts, and I studied there. And it was tough. It was tough for many, many years because I really tried. But I had mentors. I had a mentor by the name of Mako, who who was an Academy Award nominee for Sand Pebbles and a Tony Award nominee for Stephen Sondheim's The Pacific Overtures. But he was my mentor. He had started a little theater in Los Angeles called the East West Players, and it was full of Asian American people, artisans, designers, craftspeople, writers, actors, singers. And we did theater, and he would tell me one time I got offered a job on Broadway, and he said, "Well, you can go take the job. It's not really a big part. It's almost like a chorus boy's part." And he says, "But you're not really that good as an actor. You need more training." You
Damn.
know, it's kind of like the Zen master. It's like
Yeah.
you're not that good. You know, you need training. And when you're young, you think I'm good. I'm ready to go. I want to do Hamlet.
Yeah.
And he would say, "No, you need to train." And so I went to New York. I borrowed some money. I went to New York, and he was at New York at the time, and he took me all around. He paid for some of my lessons. I studied actors studio. I studied Grotowski. I went to ballet classes. He made me go to learn opera. I studied opera. I learned Italian classics and the German leader and French and everything. I learned everything. You know, modern dance. I took ballet. I took tap dance. So I really, I turned down that job on Broadway and I just studied for many years.
Mm. That,
Yeah.
that's that's awesome. When I think a lot, especially my kids, I don't think they understand the breadth of acting. They think you kind of go on stage, you kind of just do it. But what you're talking about is the idea that you have to learn a little bit of everything. Like I said, opera. I don't know if my kid would imagine opera connects directly to what they see in a movie, or ballet, or what they see on television. Connect us on how understanding all forms of performance helps you to become a better actor, and how much of your success is skill and how much has it been taught.
Well, let me tell you something. Uh, Unlike music, unlike painting, there's no real science to acting.
Mm,
You know, there's no like draw a straight line, and you have to be able to draw a straight line to do start drawing and painting.
mm,
You know, you have to be able to lift your leg up above your head. If you want to do ballet, you need to lift off the ground. You need to do a tour jeté. You need to do a turn. Uh, However, acting, how can you determine what's good and what's bad? How can you tell a student, if you do this and this and this, you will be good? So we have to study, and this is from my mentor, all the sciences that surround us as actors, the performing art. And dance is very important. Language skills is important. How you understanding culture is even important. How to understand the history of art movements, realism to
mm,
impressionism to modernism. You have to be able to expand your kineticism, and you do that by studying the sciences. If
mm,
you don't, you're just going to be one note.
mm.
And like music, you need to read the score. John Coltrane or Dizzy Gillespie didn't just get up there and start wailing.
Yeah.
They had to learn the pentatonic scales. They had to learn, diatonic scales. They had to learn monochromatic. They had to learn how to produce sound. And all these sciences like ballet, opera help us. That doesn't mean you have to be great in ballet, or I would never be a ballet dancer, you know. And studying of languages, different cultures, it helps you to think further
Mm,
beyond. And I'm talking about, I've done a lot of anime, and like people think, oh, you do a great voice. So what? Anybody can do a great voice, but what's the depth behind that voice? What is the subtext of the line? You know, and and you have to learn culture. You have to learn culture, but because people from different cultures express themselves in different ways. Sound. My mentor told me sound is as important as words
mm,
because you can't lie with a sound. If I make a sound, it, like animals make sounds, they will tell you how they feel, and you can identify. If you have an animal or a cat, and when they're hungry, they let you know how they feel. When they're mad at you, they let you know how they feel. When they're frightened, vulnerable. So they don't have words, they have sounds. But you instantly kinetically understand what their subtext is.
Yeah.
So as an actor, those are the things that are very important, you know?
And I think one thing that I really like is the word you're using subtext. Once again, because as an English teacher, obviously I obsess over the subtext of literature. And obviously we're reading Shakespeare right now. We're trying to get the kids to understand the subtext. And I think a lot of my students don't always make the connection between the importance of understanding how to read a page and then the actual acting of those words and how that
Yeah.
connects to each other. Can you kind of talk about the importance of understanding the skills of English with the skills of acting?
You know, you have to learn. Like I said, I was raised speaking a certain patois, which was a very colorful language. It's called Pidgin English. And what it is, it's a laborer's uh, way of speaking. And what would happen was in Hawaii, you know, different immigrants would come to the island the, to work the fields, to work the plantations. It would be Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Filipino, and now Vietnamese, Portuguese. So we all had to learn how to speak to each other. So we devised our own language. Now, and so in English, yeah, I'm still learning today, you know, the way to speak the text. You got to understand the text because writers really, you know, I hate these actors who go, well, my character wouldn't say that. Well, that's not your job. It's not your job is to find out what works within the text that the writer has been writing because they don't just write, you know, they work on it. That's their job. You know, that's their how to interpret, like you said, English. You must understand it. You must understand the words, the verbiage. And for me, you know, I was highly uneducated in terms of vocabulary, and I had to really learn. I had to really struggle and learn, and I still learn today.
Now, the other interesting about for acting, because I kind of think it was very interesting when your mentor told you that you weren't a good actor, right? And I
Yeah,
found that acting is a little bit like sports, in which I can't remember who said it. It might have been Ted Williams talking about baseball, saying, even if you hit 300, you fail 70% of the time. I mean,
yeah,
that's how it works. And
yeah.
acting feels like it works similarly, which is you audition for X number of jobs, you only get a small portion of those jobs you actually go for. It's a lot of failing before you get the roles that you want to get. And honestly, I mean, you've done over 300 credits, so you've done a lot of roles, but a lot of for acting is people saying no to you. How do you mentally handle that type of lifestyle where you have to hear no probably more than you're hearing yes because that's the nature of the job.
Well, that's what differs the professional and the amateur.
Mm,
You have, like I've told one person, I said, I've been rejected by the best, you know,
yeah.
and rejection is sort of the kind of like the armor that you wear on yourself as a warrior in terms of like acting.
Mm,
You know, you have to love that rejection. You have to try and understand that rejection. And I've cried in many pillows over rejection, but
mm.
it's our life, and you have to learn to digest it. It's, you know, it's a really cold meal, but you have to learn to that it's part of your life. And I find that most people can't. Most people can't. Most people, you know, they blame, you know, you watch these sports, amateur sports, and they're always, well, you know, I didn't catch the ball because the sun was in my eye. Well, hey, catch the ball. That's your job. I
Right.
don't care, you know? And so that's what we must transcend, you know, transcend that amateur uh, thinking and go into professionalism. And that's what makes me differ between somebody who wants to be an actor versus someone who is an actor. And I'm an actor.
Well, like I said, you've been doing it for about 50 years.
Yeah,
I know you said there was credits. You said you've done even more credit than 300, which is amazing
yeah.
for the course of a career. I mean, do you still have to audition? What do you learn from the auditions themselves that have helped you become better at doing them?
This is a very tricky question, Jeff. And I tell you, you can't, it's hard to be good on the audition for anybody
Hmm.
because you're being judged. So it's hard to be, and it's the audition is only the first stage because how you audition and what and the results later on and how you develop the character might be totally different, you know?
Right.
So all you can present on an audition is your skill level, you know? That means, and I'll tell you, studying gives you that confidence because your skill level becomes very apparent when you audition. You might not be the character, but they'll say, "Oh, the guy came to, he didn't come to play. He came,
Hmm.
you know, he came to do it." And so, yeah, I still have to audition. People don't know me. Even I've done all kinds of iconic characters. They would, and people, they would recognize one guy who has an anime lead more than me, who's done hundreds of animated shows. I
Mm.
mean, I've done Miyazaki, I've done Disney, you know, I've
Yeah.
done George Lucas. I mean, what the hell do I have to do, you know?
Yeah.
But, it's our job. That's the nature of our business. Unfortunately, it's not based on skill. It's based on visuality, like looks
Mm.
or whatever is popular. And you must not let that stand in your way because most of us are not born good looking and are never going to remain youthful. And
Yeah.
go watch a movie. Go see how many old people you see in it,
Mm.
right? See how many people of color you see in it. See how many uh, homely looking people in it. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't have the words, but you know, not that many, you know. That's why network TV is so, I never watch network TV because it's always beautiful people running around beating up bad people. Well, I know bad people, and bad people don't, bad people, you can't beat them up like those guys are bad.
Right.
You know, those guys will take you down, but it's always some woman in high heels, who's got a great hairdo who like kicks the shit out of a bad guy. And it's like, huh? That ain't real. Yeah. The reason I audition is because I need to work, because I need to make my medical every year.
Mm.
And that is the criteria, you
Yeah.
know. Many jobs I don't audition, many jobs I call and they ask for me. But I often, every actor, I don't care, like I remember Shelley Winters, who had two Oscars, was asked to audition and she brought her two Academy Award, her Oscars with her, and she said, "Here's my audition." You know, but corporate structure being the way it is, if somebody's going to invest money in you, you know, they want to see what you're going to do, which is so
Mm.
stupid because what I do on the first day of an audition is might not be what you're going to get in the end.
Right.
I could be better as the more I work on it, the more I work with the actor who I'm going to work with, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can memorize my lines, get everything, think of my actions, but when I'm on camera with Al Pacino, you got to throw all that out the window,
Right.
and you got to work with Al. And same way with B. Arthur. It's the same thing. You go work, you could plan, you could do all your thing, but when B's there, you better be ready to go.
It,
So I mean, it's ridiculous. Like I'll just say, hey, go look at my films, and tell me if you want me.
you have a long career in theater, film, live action television, animation, anime. Do you consider acting differently according to which type of acting it is, or is acting acting?
Uh, It's a different craft. It's like, but it's between like, do you know fencing at all? Do you know they use a saber, they use an épée, and
Yeah.
they use a sword. So it's like it's a different like sabers are different from épées and swords and so on. It's just being able to use all the different weapons in your armory, you know. So, but it's basically the same. Basically, you know, you get to learn a certain method for yourself, and it works for you. Um, and you use whatever technique or whatever tricks, to help you.
Hmm. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is one of the biggest ways that animation has changed over the last probably it has been more of like the last 20 years or so is that performing instead of like I interviewed recently Neil Ross who did G.I. Joe and Transformers. We're talking about how you would act together in a studio. Now, when you talk about acting with a lot of the people I talk to, you're now by yourself in a room at home recording, and then you just kind of like filter all the acting together. How has that changed how you perform, being that you're not in the room anymore with your co-actors?
Well, I would say something like G.I. Joe was a wonderful experience because we all sat in the room,
Mm.
maybe 20 of us at one time, and we had the microphones in front of us. And it was war. I mean, well, Cobra sat on one side, the Joe sat on the other
Really?
side. You know, and then we had all the spectrums of all type of voice actors. And there is, like Frank Welker, who was great voice actor.
Mm.
I mean, he's the best. I mean, and he kind of like mentored me, when I first started. Certainly he was kind of like a role model, and then you had the kind of like really wild guys, the guys who were like, like lifestyle. They were just, Chris Latta was kind of like crazy, and it's fun to work with, but you never know what to expect. And then you had the guys who were stage actors, whose voices were always trained,
Yeah.
so, uh, and then you had the voice technicians, the guys like Don Messick who could like create any voice, and like Frank, they say, Frank, we need a sound of a rocking chair in the corner. We didn't record that. He goes, is it wood? How old is it? How heavy? And he gave you four versions of a rocking sound of a rocking chair, which he actually did. I saw that and I just said, oh my God, I don't think I'll make it as a voice actor after working with Frank. But Frank urged me, right? Frank urged me, and consequently, I worked a lot with Frank. Um, so what was the question?
Well, basically, obviously, back in the day, you would perform with these
Yeah.
actors in the room. Nowadays, from my understanding of how this works, you're basically in a studio at home, recording your
Yeah.
voice, and then they stick you or on Zoom, and they kind of then just record, splice you with the other actors.
Well, Jeff, I'm going to say it, but a lot of times you just get a surface level of acting, and unless you're really well trained, and I'm talking about some of the best, like Fred Tatasciore, Kevin Michael Williams, Gray Delisle, those people bring something deep within themselves, and no matter how they're recording, they're just wonderful, and I learn from these people, you know. But then most of it, I would say, when you're recording by yourself, you're doing a job. It's like, it's okay, but it's nothing something special, and that's what's missing when you're working collectively, because you're always challenged. And that's the thing of what happened with GI Joe is like, if you weren't good, man, you're done. This is true. This is true. People were replaced all the time, you know, and you had to be good. And like you're shaking because you're working with some of the great talents, you know. You're working with B.J. Ward, you know, you're working with Michael Bell, Greg Berger, Rob Paulson, Corey Burton. I mean, these guys are good. And you come there and you're going like, oh my God, you know, I got to be good. And So, and it pushes you further. And if you want to make it, you better be able to swim at those boys and girls. And so nowadays, and nowadays everything is digital. In my days, it was analog, you know. So it's like the engineer can kind of make you look good, make you fit the lip flaps in a cartoon. Whereas in my days, you had to make it. You had to do it, and if you had to do it in 3 takes. If you didn't do it in 3 takes, you're done. They never asked you back. And I worked with some pretty heavyweights in those days. I started when Robin Williams was starting doing voice work too, and Phil, what's his name? The guy that was on Saturday Night Live.
Phil Lamar?
He was, huh?
Is it Lamar?
No, no,
Oh, Phil Hartman.
Phil
Phil Hartman.
Hartman.
Yes.
Brilliant, brilliant. We would go in and he could dub a whole movie by himself. He could do all the voices. He was brilliant. And so uh I think recording now because tech technical side is so advanced, you can get away with a lot of stuff. But one thing I really loved and I really respected Dave Filoni when we did Star Wars Rebels. He tried to do it as a group as
Mm.
much as possible. And so, you get to know people. And when you get to know people, you start working better. Like I just love working with Steve Bloom and Freddie Prinze and Vanessa Marshall. You know, they're just wonderful voice actors. They're wonderful actors, wonderful human beings. And when that happens, your options become wider.
Mm.
You come in when you work by yourself, you kind of like have a preconceived notion of what the character is, what the story is, and what you're going to do. But when you're working with other human beings, and as wonderful as Stevie Bloom, I love the guy, and I love working with him, and that comes out in your performance. It gives you more options. Like, oh, should I be mean here? Should I be good here? Should I be kind here? Should I be, understanding, empathetic, sympathetic, you know? And so Filoni was smart in that way. Of course, he had the budget to do it too,
Right.
you know. So I mean, it and a lot of things now you got to understand it's budgetary confinement. Like some studios don't have the kind of money to record, and they need somebody who can come in and just do it quick, give it to them, and get out. You know, Save me some studio time. Yeah.
Mm. Now, the one of an animated series you were in recently was Gremlins, Legends of the Mogwai.
Yeah.
Secrets of Mogwai, sorry, Secrets of Mogwai. And you played your scenes were across from George Takei, who played Noggin. Now, when you were able to do that series, were you able to act across from George Takei, or was this separate recordings? And how did that impact things?
No, no, that was during COVID, so we had to record at home. I
Mm.
had to record it out of my house. Yeah, but I knew George long, long time ago. You know, we were and George had studied at RADA, which was the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in England, or
Mm.
something like that. So he was on a different plane from me. But we became good friends, and
Yeah.
he's very well admired in my community anyway. Um, And but I work with a lot of people, a lot of interesting people, a lot of good people, a lot of not so good people.
Mm. Now, the one thing as well that I know as a trend has changed as well. Um, a lot of the 80s and 90s, you had professional voice actors. That's what that's they specialized in it. They were in a lot of different shows, such as yourself. You really did live action as well. Nowadays, they do a lot of voices are like celebrity. They come in, they do a celebrity voice, whatever. Is there a different level of quality from the actors who are specialized from voice acting? They practice it versus, let's say, the celebrities who come in and take over a voice in an animated film or something like that. Can you tell a difference in quality?
Uh, no, because a good actor will eventually adjust. Like Dustin Hoffman doing Sensei Shifu in Kung Fu Panda. You know, he might start off rough, but I mean, eventually he's an actor, and he will. adjust his own self. So, and those are the kind that you really feel comfortable with. And some celebrity voices who have no idea, but they're not known as good actors anyway,
Mm,
you know. So, um, but it's something that we have to put up with as voice actors, you know. And I mean, we got to sell the movie, and it's the movie's not going to sell with somebody you've never heard of before. You know, you got to have a star name. We understand that, you know. Uh, Sometimes that goes wrong on their end, because you still need a good movie because you might have a star in some great animated film, but if it's a dog, it's a dog, you know. So we voice actors understand our position and we try and support. That is our role. We try and support those celebrity actors, and make them feel comfortable. And that's our job too, you know?
mm.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of interesting too. Going back a little bit to what you said about G.I. Joe, where you said the people who were Cobra acted separately or in a specific room from the people who played G.I. Joe. That is funny. Was there like a real rivalry felt between you guys, or like was it just like being connected with those who are like on your side? Like that, can you kind of break that down a little bit for me?
Well, the villains in movies are always for actors are always the wonderful part.
Right.
You know, those are the guys with a lot of, character and a lot of life experience.
Yeah.
Because why are they villains? Because some tragedy happened to them in their life, you know?
Hmm.
And some really conflict. They have like a lot of internal conflict going on there. Whereas the good guys are just so pure and they're just out to save the world, you know?
Hmm.
You know? So I mean, I guess that's why Batman it was so loved because he had that villainous quality in him, you know.
Hmm.
Um, and but so in G.I. Joe, the Joes were all American rah rah, but Cobra was like, yeah, you know, the forces of every human being that lies within themselves, you know.
Hmm. And I think that's also kind of cool is that talking about like the villains. You obviously play one of the most famous G.I. Joe characters of all time, Storm Shadow. He was such a wonderful character. Um, but the interesting thing about Storm Shadow, unlike a lot of the Joes, because as we were talking about, is that he had nuance to his character. He was a villain, but an honorable villain. He had layers to him. Um,
Yeah.
it, a lot of those layers too. Some of it was on the page. I know that there was a great episode where he saved Spirit's life because Spirit helped him in a cavern and he owed a debt and he paid the debt, things of that nature. But it's not always on the page necessarily about why. How much of the Storm Shadow character did you have to kind of create for your headcanon for? How much was it just, and how fun was it to make create a character that was, in many ways, had more depth to him than a lot of the other characters in G.I. Joe around them?
Well, Jeff, you have to understand, I was a young man at that time, and I was trying to make a living as an actor.
Mm,
So I was just trying to do the best job as I could. I wasn't thinking that deep, you know. But I wanted to represent also my community in a positive way, in a real way. And if you understand animation and cartoons and the history of it, and I'm talking about coming from Hanna-Barbera and the early Disney stuff, Asian characters were usually stereotyped,
mm,
you know, and kind of like comedic.
mm,
But I based like Storm Shadow upon the history of the Japanese Americans, because we have a great history of like service to our country. Like, for example, the 442nd was an all Nisei or all Japanese American unit. They were the most decorated during World War II. They were also, there's like a celebration in France because that particular unit liberated that part of France. They also saved what was known as the Lost Battalion or the Texas Battalion, who was trapped and the Japanese American soldiers went in and saved them, and they lost more and were wounded and killed more than the people that they saved. But they heroic, and so that's why you go to Texas and there's this old time Texas going like, yeah, Japanese Americans. So I wanted to bring that kind of honor and that kind of valor to the character, and that's in every character I play. I try and, as stupid as it's written. I don't know if you know, like Men in Black 3, I play this kind of like really stereotypical Chinese restaurant owner, but that's only a front because actually underneath all that stereotype, I'm an alien.
Mm.
So, so uh I wanted to make Storm Shadow true, you know. And knowing growing up, I knew a lot of martial artists and I studied with too, and who had, lived by a certain code, which stems from the Japanese samurai or Bushido code,
Mm.
you know. And I want him to have that. And I was surprised happily to learn that Larry Hama, who has become my good friend, I've known him since 1976, wrote G.I. Joe and wrote the character Storm Shadow. And Larry was a U.S. serviceman. He served in the Army. And he also wanted to make that character true to its, nature. And that's how Storm Shadow came about. But I was young, and if I was doing it now, I would probably do it different.
And feel comfortable telling me how you would change it if given the opportunity?
I would have given him more depth. I mean, I
Okay.
just would give him more qualities that would give him more of the kind of life experience that I've had, all the victories and the tragedies that I've experienced in my life, you know.
Now, when you were doing G.I. Joe, how much were you told about the character? Was there a backstory to the character that you were privy to, or was it sort of like as an audience, what was just on the page was on the page?
When I go in to do a character, I tell them how the character should be done.
Hmm.
It is my interpretation. And I, from my experience and from my knowledge of what I've done and also of my people, I explain to uh, the creators, this is how it should be done.
Hmm.
Now, I would say 90% of the time, those people are very happy to hear that, to experience that because they don't know. They don't know. They don't know what it is to be a ninja warrior. I have some idea, you know. My uncle served in the U.S. infantry. He was a lieutenant colonel, you
Hmm.
know, in the army. Um, I understood. I understood that more than they ever could, and I wanted to bring that. So, a lot of times, a lot of characters I tell it's my interpretation. You hired me. I'm going to do it the way I do it. Some other guy would do it differently. And 90% of the time, people are like happy. Other times, to say, no, no, I want you to do it this way. I want the stereotype,
Yeah.
which is what I eventually said. I say, oh, you want the stereotype. Okay.
Well, going back to Gremlins, right? When you play Boss Chang, he's another sort of villainous sort of character that has a deep, honorable side to him. And
Yeah.
he even says, there's a line he says to Noggin. He says, if you choose love, then Chinatown will choose love too. Basically, that's deep love for his city, for his people, and an honor there. Are you intentionally choosing characters that have that sense, that streak of honor about them? Is that something you're pursuing, or is that just something that you inherently just bring?
I inherently bring, when Westerners write about Chinatown, they write about its darkness and its unpredictability uh, but we know who we are,
Hmm.
you know. We know who we are. We know what we are and why we are the way we are. We don't look at it as dark. We don't look at it as in negative, but uh, we love, we fall in love, we love our families just as anybody else does. So it's only we have that cultural trait or tinge to it. Yeah.
Hmm. And like I said, you've had such an amazingly long career. And like you've done so many great shows. Like I said, as I mentioned, G.I. Joe. Is it weird that, do you feel weird that 40 years later, people like me are still asking questions about a cartoon from 40 years ago? I mean, I mean, what does that feel like? What does that mean to you that you have your fans that are still chasing you and asking you questions about things that are years ago?
Well, listen, Jeff, I get guys coming up to me who are middle aged going, "You were my childhood,"
Yeah.
you know, and I guess that means something to you, you know.
Hmm.
I guess that means something to you, but for me, it's just all one big pot of acting, of all my craft. It's just what I did, it's what I do.
Hmm.
But to some people, it has meaning, and that's remember what I said in the beginning. It's not important how I feel. It's important how you, as the audience, feel.
Hmm.
And that's what's so great about acting is I can bring out your memories, your feelings, your experience, your sadness, and cure you from them,
Hmm.
you know? And so it does not surprise me at all. What I'm surprised about is like, how come you don't remember me from Caroline and the City? How come you don't remember me from Webster? What is it? I really loved my role in Webster. Different strokes, you know? You don't know how many women come up to me and go, I loved you in Golden Girls.
Now, the one thing that obviously you take part in, I would imagine, is the convention circuit as well. And you obviously have tons of fans approaching you for autographs or any number of things. Does that ever get old?
No, nope. Because, and I'm not gonna lie at you, like this whole fan worship thing is like beyond me. I mean, it's like uh, I like to be left alone, live in peace, read my book, watch my movie. Why would somebody have to rely on somebody else in order to make their day? I don't know. I don't know what the psychology behind that is. I'm willing to participate. I'm willing to make sure you're happy. I
Yeah.
want to make you happy that you met me, but talk to my wife. She can't be bothered with me sometimes. She says, "Don't you need to leave the house?" Or my kid who says to me, "Don't try to bond with me." So I don't know. I don't know. It's the things in human beings that they need to be, they need some kind of recognition. They need some kind of assurance that they are who they are. And if I give it to them, okay, I don't quite see why, because I know my flaws.
So what are you working on now?
Uh, I'm working on a lot, mostly right now. I've been because of streaming. I've been working on projects dubbing into English from Asia. Like I worked on like Miyazaki's The Boy and the Heron.
Mhm.
Like I dubbed the English version of the Shogun, you know. And so I dub a lot of uh, series from Asia, which I find to be really compelling, really interesting because I never get to, because in Korea they're writing for Koreans. And
Mhm.
the characters are major characters. And so I'm dubbing them into English, which I'm finding, wow, that character is great. I rarely get to play that kind of character. In American films, I'm just kind of like part of not, the major part of the story, but I kind of like add, you know,
Mhm.
like I'm the parsley on that plate sometimes, you know. or that side dish, that appetizer. I'm never the crucial main character. But
Hmm.
when I'm dubbing, I'm the main character, you know. So I find that very interesting. So it's pushing me, it's challenging me in terms of like finding the emotion behind all those conflicts. Uh, yeah. Hey, there's a couple of things I want to touch on though, because I one is the rejection thing.
Yeah,
Do you know Bernardo Bertolucci?
I may have heard the name, but I can't place it.
Come on. He directed The Last Emperor,
Okay,
great
that
Italian
one.
filmmaker. He directed the that French movie with Brando. What's it called? Something in Paris. Oh,
Oh, okay.
anyway, a great Italian film director. So I met him and I auditioned for him. I had to go meet him in a suite at the Chateau Marmont. And I took the sides and there was a cameraman there and they shot my scene. And I did it with the sides in my hand, the dialogue. And he looked at me and he said, "You didn't memorize the lines?" And I said, "Bernardo, in Hollywood, we don't memorize until we get money." And he kicked me out of the room.
Oh
So you don't,
shit.
so you don't, I was a cocky actor then. I was working all the time, and I had
Yeah,
cash, you know. And I said, "Bernardo," because I got kind of insulted. He says, "You don't like memorize your lines. It's an audition, dude. It's
right.
like in LA, we don't audition, we don't memorize our lines till we know we're getting the job."
Yeah,
I was like really cocky, you know what I mean? God, God, you gotta understand, I live poor in New York, on
yeah,
$75 a month, and I wasn't gonna take shit from no foreigner
yeah.
telling me, how I was supposed to do. And he got so that was a rejection. And you don't know what rejection is like when an Italian director as famous as he is kicks you out of his room. And and same thing happened with me and Milos Forman. I don't know, Milos Forman?
No.
Oh, come on, come on, Milos, look him up, okay? Milos Forman
Jordan.
directed great movies like Ragtime.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Oh, okay. No, I do know those.
you,
I know
you,
the movies. I didn't know
you,
the director.
yeah, okay, Milos Forman. You don't know, he kicked me out of his dressing room. I mean, he kicked me out of his hotel room. I read for him. He goes, "Okay, thank you, goodbye." Kicked me out.
Oh wow.
And as because you do a preparation and you wear a suit and you do the whole thing, and he kicks you out. I've been I went to meet John Cassavetes, you know,
Yeah.
I went to an audition for John Cassavetes, and John Cassavetes looked at me up and down. He goes, "You want to be in my film?" And he looked down. He went, "Okay, bye."
Oh shit.
So, you as an actor, you prepare a week ahead. You're like getting your clothes ready, you're ready, you make sure you got nothing in, no lettuce in your teeth. And then so you get like, you get rejected. You become pretty tough. And I've been rejected by the best. I wasn't kidding when I said that, dude.
Hmm.
You know? So, and the other thing I also wanted to tell you, because you have some kind of a Star Wars following, right?
Yeah.
Right? Your show.
Yeah.
I wanted to tell you about Star Wars Rebels because you haven't asked me too much about that. Um, in the third season, uh, Dave Filoni invited me up to San Francisco to come and go to the offices, and they have the kind of like the museum where they have the original Star Wars stuff, and he said, "Bring your family up," and he says, "We'll take care of you." And so I went up there. There was a little party, and then they and I brought my son there, and Dave, gave my son toy figures from the show, and he'd have these books, and he Dave would draw these pictures of Ahsoka and everything for my son and give my son the book. Took us out to eat lunch. He was very kind. The whole staff over at Lucasfilms was there, and they all were very nice to me because they had recognized me from True Blood, which they were fans of. And so Dave said, I want to tell you something before you leave. I went, yeah, yeah, Dave. And he goes, the season, we're going to kill you.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
And he said, but you're going to die a really great death. I
Oh.
went, oh, okay. Thanks, Dave. Is that what you invited me up here for? You know? So that's the experience of a life of an actor. You know, you come up there and they like, yeah, you're not going to be in the fourth season because we're killing you, dude.
Does that make it better? The fact that it's to be a good death, does that make it better, or is it just not another paycheck and that doesn't matter
I was
more
like, damn
than
it, damn it, dude. You know, it's like, come on, can't you make me like come back from the dead? You know? And that
Force
was it.
ghost?
And that was my end of my career in Star Wars Rebels, you know. Fortunately, I Dave has never called me back. I don't know if he's pissed off at me or what, but I mean, you know. Yeah, then in Mandalorian, they hired a guy who looks like me, walks like me, talks like me, but isn't me, if you know who
Right.
I'm talking about.
Yeah, he's on
But
my ship.
but anyway, consequently, I've gone on to work on other Lucas projects, which is I feel very grateful for.
Well,
And
well, another group of that my audience is deep in Star Trek, and you played Hoshi's father from Enterprise as well, which was very
yeah,
cool.
yeah, but I was Buck Bokai in Deep Space Nine,
True enough, true.
the baseball player from the future.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right. That's right. I mean,
yeah.
you've been in, you've had so many different major franchises, and like I said, every time we talk about franchises, the fans behind them are fanatical. That's where the idea of fan comes from. Um, which fan base has been the best to interact with?
Okay, I got to tell you, well, Golden Girls is great. You know, it's still popular today.
Yeah.
But I was out in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was surrounded by a group of ladies who just are big fans of Scarecrow and Mrs. King,
Really?
which starred Kate Jackson.
Yeah.
And across the country, they've kind of like followed me, you know,
Wow.
and kind of like, I mean, like I was in Pasadena and some lady came and bought for her group 16 of my autographs, you know,
Yeah.
and they are so warm to me and they have like meetings and they have annual like get-togethers and, you
Really?
know, yeah.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
yeah, it's
I-
Scarecrow and Mrs. King.
Is
Google it.
it creepy or awesome when someone is that fanatical about you and your show?
Well, it's awesome because these are like your middle class, like urban, suburban mothers.
Right.
Like I would never interact with them in any way. And they become my pals, like, you know.
That's cool.
Yeah. I was like, wow, you know.
That's awesome. Like I said, and that's cool. And like I said, how about the for like anime as well? Because I know that's a growing thing. And you said you did Miyazaki, one of the great legends of anime.
Yeah.
Is that what's that been like? Is that also a different atmosphere and fans than American cartoon animation?
Nah, it's just something to brag about.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you've done that. Okay, I've worked with Miyazaki, have you? You know,
That is awesome.
you
And
know, but it's no big thing, really. I grew up on anime and manga as a child. So it's no big thing to me. Okay, this is not between you and me, but I'm going to tell you something personal.
okay,
Anime in this country is really burst open, but I don't think people really understand it, you
okay,
know. Let me ask you a question. If anime was African, came from Africa,
yeah,
it was genre developed in Africa, and it became popular, and it was brought over to America, who do you think would be doing the voice dubbing? African American actors. I
show
think if they started doing that, there would be a political problem.
hmm,
But not so in the case of like Asians, you know, like so I mean, I always find flaws in terms of like anime dubbing,
hmm,
you know, in terms of like not only pronunciation of words and names, but attitude.
okay.
I don't think they get it right, in other words. It's trying to put a Western in a samurai film,
Mm.
you know? And so you got to be careful how you construct it. So anime hasn't really impressed me in this country yet,
Mm.
you know. Now I do one, and now people are starting to get hip about that and starting to say, well, we better get somebody who's really authentic, you know. So it's like I was fortunate enough to, there's this animated series called Record of Ragnarok. It's on Netflix. It's an anime. And I play a very famous Japanese legendary warrior. His name is Sasaki Kojiro. See, and even I say Sasaki Kojiro, it's the way to pronounce it. And I've heard just so many ways um, a Japanese word or name of an item mispronounced. And it just, you know, it just, I don't think it really, in other words, a anime has got a lot longer way to go before it really develops itself into what it could be.
Now,
That's my opinion.
well, as someone who, in my personal opinion, when talking about American animation, which kind of felt like it became at its peak in the 80s, in the 90s, kind of where they started developing as an actual developed story and not instead of just kind of more silly or animation that came out before then. Do you see a similar growth in anime, the way animation, American animation kind of grew from 70s, 80s, and 90s into basically, I mean, in the 90s, you had stuff like The Simpsons, Batman being primetime television at that point. And with that level of quality, do you kind of see anime at the beginnings of where animation in America was back then, like a similar growth, or do you think it's coming in a different way?
I mean, a different way. I mean, like anime has been around for a long, long time in Japan,
Right.
you know. And remember what I said about sound?
Yeah.
If you read anime, manga, and you know anime, sound is really important, inherent in the material. As is Japanese language, sound is very important. And that's what's missing for me. The proper sound, the proper attitude, the proper sound. But, give it time and I hope that it'll develop, you know.
Now, for a lot of people would argue that for like streaming has not been good for network television, but I feel like streaming has been great for anime, foreign films, stuff like that, that people would not have may not have been picked up or viewed, but now that it's on streaming, they're not getting the attention that they deserve. Do you feel streaming has been a huge benefit to the anime foreign film in this country?
There's just too much product right now. I
Mm,
mean, I don't know what to focus on. People don't know what to focus on. People don't know what is good.
mm,
People know what's popular, but they don't really know what's good because they don't understand, I think, the history of the culture,
mm,
you know? See, in my days, we didn't have a phone that we carried around with. We had a pocketbook
mm,
and we would read.
yeah.
And I think that's what's missing right now, you know?
Mm,
People are getting their culture through TikTok or Instagram and not reading literature. And so that's what's missing in a lot of the product on TV and in streaming. It's not good.
mm,
It's mediocre. A lot of it is.
yeah.
And so I don't know if that answers your question. I just think right now there's just too much stuff and people are just trying and like the people with the money are trying to fill in the holes, like, oh, we need time here. We need to have this. We need the. And it's like, sometimes more is less, and less is more,
Mm.
you know. I still read two books at a time, you
Oh
know.
yeah.
I read something that's nonfiction and I read fiction, you know. And I still feel like I don't know Jack. There's a lot of things I haven't read,
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah.
So I'm gonna say like, that's. I mean, I definitely have gone back and became a fan of reading classic literature works. after like, I think what I realized was when I was growing up is that I did not pay enough attention to the books that mattered or the books that had weight to them, gravity to them. And I feel like
Right.
much is what they call it, not expendable, but it's like the expendable like beach reads. And we're not spending the time with stuff that have actual weight to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that so what happens is we try and fill our day with something, it's like it's like that first cup of coffee in the day. The first cup is really great, but we keep drinking coffee to try and recreate that sensory of the first cup.
Mm,
And we just keep going. And it's like, no, no, you know,
right.
refrain from doing that. Understand what is good, what is not good. Try to learn. And I think, because I have a 16-year-old boy, and it's like, dude, you're filling your head with all these images, but you know nothing.
Yeah, no, I feel that way. Like I said, I teach 14-year-olds. I know how it goes.
Yeah.
And the what they find interesting is mind numbing. It's mind numbing, unfortunately, but mind numbing.
Yeah.
The TikTok, whatever trendy things, and it's like trendy things are nice in the moment, but they don't have anything to carry with them for years and whatnot. Not the way watching, something of quality or reasonable quality has.
Yeah. Well, I always got to remind my wife, because she complains about my son. I go like, well, go back, think of when you were 14, 15, 16. You know,
Yeah.
you were just as dumb, right?
Yeah, I
One other thing you mentioned, the Midsummer Night's Dream. Is that the
yeah,
thing you're?
yeah, we're reading that right now in my English class.
Okay, I'll tell you something really funny about that.
Okay.
See, I left my home in Honolulu when I was 17 to
Yeah.
come here to become an actor to Los Angeles. We say when in Hawaii, we say we go to the mainland, the mainland. So I came to California. Of course, there was a lot of racism. I encountered a lot of racism, a lot of
Yeah.
negative terms, and a lot of, you know. And then I went to a play. I went to see Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was getting bored. It's just like long and everything. And then there's a scene about this chink in the wall. I jumped up and went, "What the fuck?" I said, "What? What does it mean, chink in the wall? Who's what chink?" And I thought Shakespeare is like, is he a racist or what? Do you know the scene I'm talking about, where he looks
um,
through the hole in the wall?
I remember. I know the scene you're talking about. I can't remember the exact part of it, but I no, I definitely remember the scene.
Yeah. So that's one of my first encounters with Shakespeare. So,
That's all.
and I looked around, I jumped up, and I was like, everybody was like, laughing and everything, and I was like, damn, I was angry.
Well, Lisa, if you ever want to talk to some kids, once a month we host guests on Zoom to talk about literature and acting stuff like that. So you're always welcome to join. Take questions from a bunch of 14-year-olds. Totally up to you. But it's something we got to do. We just started doing that again with them last month. We've had a comic book writer, and we're moving along to deal with something Shakespeare related to try to get the acting. The kids want to be an actor to actually pursue it because there's always a difference between kids who say they want to be an actor and kids who are going to be serious about it. And it'd be great to get the kids who are serious about it to actually get serious about doing it. That's kind of where we are next.
Well, the primary thing about any character in any literature story is the character of Hamlet and the character of Bambi have one thing in common, and that is their need,
Hmm.
you know? So I always tell people, as stupid as a role may be, you have to put it on the equated with Hamlet, in terms of like the character's need.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it's kind of interesting watching these kids. The lights are starting to flash because right now we just started Act Two for Hamlet. We are stopping obviously the reading last couple of days because of the vacation coming up tomorrow. But the kids are just beginning to get the light turn on when they start understanding what the Shakespeare language actually means. We're right at the cusp of that, where the words are beginning to make sense to them, and that's when it's
Yeah.
actually getting kind of fun. Because now they're getting kind of into like the love triangles and this whole thing and beyond it. And it's fun watching the lights go on in their heads as things start making sense. They figure
Yeah.
this impossible language isn't really that impossible anymore. But anyways, Mr. Young, thank you so much for talking with me. Like I say, anytime you want to come back and talk about a new project, come back on. You've been fantastic, and I'll
Yeah, I
let you
hope
know when it
so.
goes live.
Good, good, good. I hope that I've contributed to your podcast, and
Indeed.
and let me know what the response is.
All right,
I'm always
totally.
interested.
And I'll share you the link, so you might get tagged more than you would like when this goes live. But I want to thank you
Okay.
again for doing it for me, sir.